couple just overarching design rules to keep in mind, and a lot of the best practices I talk about today align with these kind of root rules. Always, always less is more. I cannot tell you the number of times I get into situations where I'm trying to help people with a website and I'm hearing from numerous people on the team try to explain it. And everybody has that different perspective. Everyone's looking at it with a different goal in mind. And that's reflected sometimes in the website. And so I challenge people that if you have to take a lot of time to explain it and it's too complex, it's probably really difficult for the constituent to understand, right? Your job is to make this as quick and fast as possible, get them through registration. That should help you get more registrations and more engagement. So minimize any of that confusion. Right in line with that, don't make everything stand out at once. Again, if things are competing on a page, oh, that looks like the most important thing, but I want this to be the most important thing. As a reader, two things can't be as important at the same moment in time. You really need to decide what is the goal of this event, probably to get them to register, and you all need to collaborate on how to make that happen. What is the most effective way to meet that end goal together? And this is also more of a myth that is just going out of style, I would say, that users do not scroll, and that is not the case at all, right? Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, any of these things would not exist if scrolling didn't work. So I think people have gotten in the habit more of doing so, but with that caveat that so long as it's clear that there is additional relevant information as they continue. And I alluded to this earlier, make registration fast, then make it faster. This idea that you are going to make the perfect registration form once, you never need to do anything to it, and you can come at it from a lot of different angles to make it better. And so sometimes I see people, which I can understand, not do like a template review, or doing it only like once a year. And while that's perfectly fine, there's just things are changing constantly, your constituents are changing. And so doing that all at one point in time can feel like a lot for you, as well as any changes that you make on the constituent. So just gradual progression, I think, is much better and gets you towards that end goal faster. We'll touch a little bit on writing, and a topic I tend to shy away from, not my strong suit, but I do have some lovely writers on my team that I rely heavily on. But with that, be consistent. I've seen sometimes where you'll either get a writer or an editor at different points in time, or even getting different people. And so if you have somebody else writing the content on the website compared to the person who is writing the content that goes in the know before you go message, people can pick up on that. They might not be able to call it out specifically, but just that lack of continuity, again, just it helps with trust, just having that same tone, voice, all of that throughout the event. And also just in all of your interactions with your constituents, right? Also, and I know, right, we have wildly intelligent people working for the university, and sometimes we can use some language that might not resonate in other fields. And I think sometimes I'll see this with faculty, where if it's a faculty specific event, of course, maybe some of that language makes sense. But for the most part, and when you have really broad audiences, alumni, donor events, these large staff events, things like that, simpler language is better. It can sometimes come off as conceited, right? People shouldn't have to be confused. So a very simple example, but buffering versus preparing video. We talked a bit about this on Tuesday as well, is the importance of making things scannable, comes down to it, people do not read things. They scan things, and once they find what they think is the area that they want to look at, they will then dive in deeper. So making it scannable is really in your best interest. And a couple of good ways of doing this with writing is by using bullets or numbered lists. It formats it differently, it puts white spacing around it, it draws your attention, but it's also short and sweet. You know why my eyes go to it. Using lots of headings, so similar to the page that we're looking at right now, that you can scan quickly what this page is about if you want to read more. And don't just stop at having one header, go those multiple layers down if there is enough content on your site to warrant that. Using bold text, clearly one that I use pretty often, drawing attention to the most important words and just kind of allows you to edit even further. Giving descriptive names to buttons, which is great in Cvent Flex, that just when you bring in a button, it automatically names it something that's pretty descriptive, like register, save, or you can even modify it further to say like save my seat, but we would never want to see click here. It's very generic things. And of course, writing concisely. I think the biggest part of editing is deleting, which is often hard to do. You've spent a lot of hard time writing that content, but less is more again. So while I've had editors challenge me on this one before, and this is where it depends on your unit. That's why these things should be a conversation. There's not hard and fast rules, but I absolutely gravitate towards, instead of the full sentence, would you like to save changes? Just save changes. So I'm curious what other people go for as well. When building out your website, if you're having a moment of nobody else's site looks anything like this, that is not necessarily a good thing. I think we're all pretty used to just websites in general having navigation up at the top, right? Pretty clear, unwise to shove your navigation down at the bottom. I'm honestly not even sure if Cvent Flex will let you do that. So don't be too obscure. That's not a way to be unique, I guess. It can cause frustration with those registrants, rightfully. And then the other reason I mentioned earlier, just every time you have an event, assessing what you can do better. Maybe it's making the language more concise. Maybe it's reviewing what registration questions you're asking, whatever small thing you're looking at. It helps to make that change over time, and that's because of your constituents. I know there was a big change from Classic to Flex, somewhat inevitable. And so if every 6 months you just do a complete overhaul, that can be frustrating. You can get to that same end goal by making small changes over time. And another good rule with that, say you want to change something up, don't replace something. Say you want to try your registration button in a different place. Don't just nix where your old one's been for 5 years and put it in the new place. Put it in both for a while before you go ahead and gravitate away from how you used to do it. Baby steps. So accessibility is very, very important, and it can often contradict what folks want in their forms. And so this is another area where there is a big balance of, am I asking the event planner what they think is the prettiest, and maybe they're not really familiar with accessibility, or is accessibility at the forefront of your mind? And where do you fall in between those two spectrums? And so not a deep dive, accessibility is a big topic, and actually is thinking about talking about it on Marketing Cloud in the next couple of months. So I might do that with the Cvent as well, but just some overarching things, again, giving descriptive names to buttons. I know I already mentioned that just as a best practice, but think about people on screen readers. They're being told, right, with audio, what the text is. And so when something's click here, that's really useless. Alt tags is a big one, and I'll show you this within Cvent. Any image that you're adding in there, you should be adding alt text to. And this is especially important with the case that I brought up on Tuesday. So some stylistic buttons. So absolutely need to have those alt tags set on it to also be register. And so that is a reason why I've seen some people say, no, we need to put accessibility more at the forefront. We are not going to create images as our buttons. And so just continuing to finesse where you want to fall in that. As Monica said, we are all getting better. She and I have worked together many years, and really every couple of months, every communication, this comes up, and it's hard to keep so many things at the forefront of your mind constantly, but accessibility also goes back to universal design. What is it, 20% of people, the odds are that 20% have some accessibility needs that are coming to your site. So the notion that it doesn't impact you or your population, just simply not true. Not placing text on images. Again, that's not going to read to somebody what is written on that image. Not to mention a mobile bad practice. At some point, that image is going to be really tiny, and that text is probably not going to be readable. So again, it comes from accessibility, but really turns into this universal design that serves everybody. Headers, we've talked about this just in visually, how you break up your content, how you architect things with that typography. But with accessibility and screen readers, this becomes even more important to actually use those tags. That those screen readers have the ability to jump through that top header or the second header or the third header. And so that's how somebody without ability to see that, how you've laid out your site, how they can scan it. And so if you're not using those header tags, it's not scannable from a screen reader perspective. We talked about using bullets and numbered lists just for scannability. It's also really important for accessibility to not interchange the two. A numbered list needs to be in order, right? Step 1, step 2, that step 2 cannot come before step 1. Whereas bullets, they can be in whatever order they want. So that's a case, again, I've had event planners like, oh, I don't like those numbers. Can you just do bullets? It's not a stylistic thing. There's context here that a screen reader is picking up. Step 1, step 2, step 3. That is important. Making links blue and underlined, it's a pretty typical thing. But one thing that I often don't mention is not making other text blue, not underlining other text. People who are colorblind, who can't see that blue text, if everything looks underlined, everything looks like a link. So try to empathize with those sort of situations. And we did talk about colors last session as well, but accessibility comes in here. And so one of the ways that you can't combine the many CU colors that we have is white and gold. Those two colors are too similar. A lot of folks cannot differentiate between the two. So something to keep in mind, and I do have an accessibility wiki out here if you're interested in looking at it immediately, but like I said, I do want to host a session on this a bit deeper soon. When it comes to multi-page registrations, a good rule of thumb, or how folks tend to react, if you have one page with a ton of registration questions on it, it can be really intimidating. So do try to break it up over numerous pages. And then you can let them know where they are in the process. So that progress bar can aid in that and give for a better experience. They're not going through page after page wondering, when is this going to end? And also best practice, and Cvent aligns with this, that well, I guess you can switch it now with Flex. But as Classic had it, that billing payment information comes at the end. And the idea being that once they've invested time in registering initially and just, right, still kind of checking out the event, looking at their sessions, things like that, then the final step being payment. They're more inclined to do that at the end. And sure, you can imagine if payment was right at the front before I really input my first name and last name, that would feel a little odd. So another just kind of design that we should all be familiar with, typical e-commerce. When it comes down to the questions that you're asking, I also see this one a ton. Oh yeah, let's just make it required. But why? Are you going to do anything with it? All that is a barrier for somebody registering. And while 5 seconds might not seem like a lot, it is. I think we would all take 5 seconds back these days. So no amount of time is too small. If you do want to ask a question that you are going to use, go ahead and make it optional. And as few fields as possible being required. Don't ask questions you don't intend to use. I've seen people say, oh, well, it looks too simple. Well, let's ask them what their affiliation is. Well, what are you going to do with that? I don't know, nothing. Yeah, we're not asking that. It is not a matter of your form looking too simple. Gather the information that you need to put on an event for your constituents. You don't need this extra fluff for no reason. I did fail to check this in Flex before I put this one on there. I'm not sure if it's available yet or coming soon, but I do think they have the option to have 2 columns of questions. And all the best practices I read are kind of shy away from that a single column is better. And just that going from right to left, I don't know, people tend to miss the ones on the right side of the screen. So I don't know if that's a feature I will ever utilize. I'll be curious if anybody else does. Registration format variety can also just help if you do have a ton of questions, make it not seem so cumbersome. So do utilize radio buttons and drop downs, say when there's a lot more options for them to choose. Oh, and never ask questions a registrant has to search for. If they have to go to their purse and go check something, your odds of them finishing that registration just went down significantly. So I will pop into Cvent real quick just to look at a few items. So under website and registration, I am just going to go to the event website. Nope, I've been in here too long. Website, and I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. This is one of the pages we looked at on Tuesday, but I did want to make a call out to recent feature that I also think kind of falls into that accessibility. And especially if, I think with a lot of events people are hosting that are hitting the community, if it's an international event, a lot of people have started doing that with the virtual options, that having different languages available is a really good add. So it does need to go within the header and footer of your email, and you do need to turn it on within configuration, and you can set what languages at that point. But otherwise, you're able to just go ahead and drag it in there. So that's kind of something I've moved to, of why not do it for most events, at least have that Spanish option on there. I do want to mention, we didn't talk too much about just like creating a sitemap. As this page sits, all I have on my website is a summary page. But for those more complex events, if you do want to, let's say, add a speaker page, is fairly intuitive on here as far as adding that new page and naming it. And creating it. And you do have this option to display it or not. And so this has been something that I've seen as a tip where you're not ready to publish the site, but you really need registration open and to collect it, but you're probably going to push people to this page the day before the event or something like that. So you can be working on creating these pages, reviewing them, finessing them before you decide to display them. So, great little way to not have to work on it at that moment. I will say create on it. And the other little thing here that honestly I hadn't done until, or I don't have a use case for, is that if you want to nest pages in other pages or have them in a drop down, it's under what's called a folder. So maybe all my speakers are going to go under there. And then you can drag other pages underneath it. We can see how that changed my navigation up there. Last piece that I do want to touch on around feedback. Please, please, please test your forms, but also remember that it's designed for the registrant. And so with that, there's just, by nature, there's going to be some things that you do not catch yourself, that you don't put yourself in that experience. And so having other people who are less familiar with your group can help. But I've also, and this was out of a group I used to work with, that when they did a big change, actually reached out to some of their biggest event attenders and asked them for feedback on their form. And I believe at one point they did it before it was launched, very much as a test. And those constituents were happy to be involved in that process. And they also did it a bit less involved, I guess. They sent it out, registration had actually launched, but just sent a personal email to 10 of those people saying, hey, we switched, you'll notice. If you have any feedback, please let us know. And so that provided some good feedback. And the other part, while it is a best practice to put a feedback loop on your site, I find that people aren't going to say, hey, this is broken, put this over here. This order was out of place or whatever. So really it's going to be your job to take those complaints or confusion from events and convert those into feedback on what could I have added to the registration process or the event life cycle to make sure this doesn't happen again. So I will point you all, and I'll share this link out, that we do have these other additional trainings. And so today's session or Tuesday's session, we do have that video out here as well as the presentations. And so I will get today's uploaded soon and the other two once I host those next week. But I also point you all to this resource. I've recently revamped it from other resources that I found out of Cvent. So if you do find yourself with some more time, there are other resources out here, but I have been watching them myself and regurgitating some of that information via these sessions. So by no means critical. So Monday, I am at 1 hosting a session more specific on emails and surveys. And then we'll also just look more throughout the entire event life cycle, tips and tricks, how you can be more efficient, things like that. So that'll be next Thursday at 11:30 a.m.